Chris and Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. And obviously today's unofficial sponsor is Jocko Willink, since you guys both have on
right.
Jocko stuff. So officially unofficial. Thank you, Jocko. I appreciate the time, and thank you for sending me a shirt, since I didn't get one and I didn't get the memo. But Chris, we'll go ahead and start with you. I don't know you all that well, and so I'm really excited to get to hear from you today and get to learn from you and Mike both. But can you give us a little bit of background on your baseball background and why you decided to get into coaching?
Yeah, of course. I think baseball first and foremost is kind of ingrained in the fabric of me. It's something that I've wanted to do since I literally could walk. I was just kind of that little sad kid carrying a bat and a glove around by himself, and my dad telling me kind of to figure it out. So, I think it obviously started at a very early age, but I was lucky enough to have baseball kind of take me to some really cool places. I got to go to college because of it. I went to the University of Nevada, was drafted out of there by the Cleveland Indians in 2004, way back in 2004. Kind of made my way up to the big leagues, made my debut in June 4th of 2009, and was very fortunate enough. I played parts of 10 seasons in the big leagues, got almost 7 full years in. We like to joke around a lot about, tricking people. And I think I was kind of the king of tricking about 8 different organizations into thinking I was good enough that, I could play in the big leagues. But I decided after 2018 was my last year. Joe Mauer is one of my really, really good friends with the Minnesota Twins, lifelong twin, lifelong, Minneapolis, just Minnesotan in general. Decided he was going to retire. We had a ton of talks about that in 2017, and 2018 he decided he was going to kind of hang him up. And I told him, I said, you know what, I guess that sounds like a pretty good idea. So officially it was his retirement party, the last game of the year, but unofficially it was mine too. Decided to shut it down. And originally when I decided to retire, I was going to kind of just be at home and spend more time with my wife. And I have 3 little kids. My wife was very excited about that. And really quickly, I got an opportunity, a few actually, to get into the coaching ranks. It was something that I was always very interested in. And everybody kind of told me like, oh, you'd be perfect for this. And, I kind of really didn't have like a specific idea about it, or I guess a specific direction to go. And I just kind of took the opportunities, and I interviewed for a few different teams in a few different positions. And I decided I was going to take an opportunity with the Dodgers. It was an organization that I always wanted to play for. I've kind of admired what they've done from afar. I also grew up in the Bay Area, and I was not a Giants fan. So all of my best friends were, and, obviously the Giants and the Dodgers have a very heated rivalry. So, it was kind of a good shot to take at all of my buddies on being on the opposing team. And, I had the opportunity to do it. So I said, what the heck? It was the closest team to home at the time, so I could be as close as I could to my wife and kids. And little did I know that the schedule was going to be it was definitely worse than it was as a player. And my wife didn't like that too much. So now here we are. We're all at home, hanging out. And I guess that's kind of the very long-winded story of how it kind of came to be.
I love that. Did you go to Reno High School with?
I did not. No, I should have
okay.
stated that. I grew up in Northern California, but I went to Gilroy High School in Gilroy, California.
Gotcha.
Decided to come up here for school.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. Mike, what do you got? Can you give us a short snapshot of your baseball background and what led you to coaching?
Yeah, I didn't realize we knew who we had to blame for Joe Mauer's retirement, but now we do. No, I grew up much different than Chris. Like, baseball was not my best sport by a long shot. I was horrible, probably led the team in errors and growing up in high school, and or at least middle school and little league. And then got to high school and things, I realized I wasn't going to be 6'6", 6'7" like I was hoping to, and basketball was going to have to shut down. A little too tall for soccer. And so I realized baseball was, probably so that sport I could continue to play. And it was a conversation my parents and I had that baseball was probably my best chance to maybe go to college, end up at a D3 school on an academic scholarship, University of Redlands. And then after 2 years, I transferred to Cal State Bakersfield. I mowed lawns and was the grounds crew, and just trying to, work my way into a team. And then end up having a really good senior year through some big games at UCLA against Garrett Cole and Fresno State, UC Santa Barbara, Irvine, all those big schools. And so got some attention from the draft, and then played 7 years in the minor leagues, made it Triple-A, and was destined to be a coach, I think, my whole career in a lot of ways. So I got my MBA while I was playing. And so I had a unique background, I think, in data and analytics, the ability to use that stuff. And then my undergrad in biology pre-med offered me some biomechanics and understanding how the body moves. And it was just the right time in baseball. We're seeing a big movement in that direction of health and wellness, biomechanics, and then also use of data, along with the emotional intelligence of having played the game. So it was really good.
I love that. And so I'm going to go ahead and stay with you here. And obviously, both of you guys have had the background to be able to just play the game and play at a very, very high level. And so you guys are going to nail this question, but you're working with some of the best players in the world, and you guys were some of the best players in the world. And so I guess my question is, how can we be, or how can other coaches be just an asset and an advocate for them? Because again, they're in the top 1% of baseball players in the world, and they're really, really good. And so how can we kind of earn their trust, get them to trust us enough to where we can help them as best we can?
Yeah, I think the two main things that come to mind, one is just like any relationship, starts with empathy, right? We seek to understand and to put ourselves in their shoes. And we do this not just on the field, but off the field, understanding what they're going through emotionally, their relationships, their children, their, with their extended family. I mean, the things that are going on, the challenges that are faced in baseball is really important, I think, to me. And two is I try to understand, do I 100% know what I'm talking about? If I don't know what I'm talking about, do I not have the knowledge or the hardware to be able to tell them what this information means and why it matters? If I don't, that means I need to go further my education. I need to continue to understand it until I've asked all the right questions that I can confidently walk into a relationship or a connection with a player and say, hey, here's what I got for you, and this is why it's relevant. If I can't fully answer that question for myself, then I have no business talking to a player about it. I can maybe, talk with them about an idea or where they think they're at, but I truly need to have vetted it out myself, because then when I go to them, they can always look at me and say, he doesn't come to me unless he's got something that really matters, and he's not going to waste my time with that. So, and that's probably the two main things that come to mind right off the bat when you say that.
I love that. I love that you're not just talking to talk. And I think that's something that empathy is. That's the first time I've heard that, but I really, really like that. And I think that's a great compliment to you. And it's something that I think we all elaborate on, or we know what it is, but it's another thing to put it in words. And I really like that. And so, Chris, what do you have to add to that? Is that kind of the direction that you go, or is there anything else that you'd like to add on top of that?
No, excuse me. I think Mikey killed it with that for sure. Just sometimes being a shoulder or an ear, to somebody that needs to vent about something else as well, is really a good way to, continue to hone in that relationship, to build that relationship. I think I'm kind of coming at this from a very unique perspective, because I was very fortunate to jump from playing in the big leagues to coaching in the big leagues. And, I feel like that alone, where I was not that far removed, from being in their shoes, exactly like Mike said, you have to have empathy for these kids, because, even though they're the top 1%, there is only one Mike Trout, there's one Bryce Harper, that these guys are all not those guys, and these guys have struggled, and that is what makes them who they are. Yes, but being that shoulder to cry on sometimes, and that ear to just sit there and listen and really try to understand the player for who he is. That was one thing that I always tried to do, was just as a player, even is, when I'm talking to a pitcher from a catching standpoint, I tried to get to know these guys on a personal level, because I felt like if I knew how you were going to act, or react off the field, I knew what kind of player you most likely would be on the field. And, just kind of creating those and cultivating those relationships from a communication standpoint, and being empathetic. I think that's the biggest thing. Is the thing I hated the most as a player was a guy just a coach telling you, like, why can't you do this? Or the guy's 75 years old, he never saw a ball that was 85 miles an hour, let alone 97. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful by any means, but sometimes having that empathy is going to go a long way for those guys.
No, and I think the further we get away from it, the further, or the more the less we remember about how hard
Without
the
a
game
doubt.
was.
Yeah.
Man. And obviously you've seen it up close of how good today's players are, and they're only getting better. And I love that. And another thing that we're starting to see more of, and you've been in a really cool position, because baseball started the trend in like the mid 2000s while you were playing to like the data age that we're in now, where we've got literally almost everything imaginable. And with Hawkeye and with markerless tracking coming now, and it's just going to be crazy. So one, I for me, I think it's how do we simplify complex topics into digestible pieces and using data. But kind of what's your process in understanding that? What's your process in delivering that? And just how do you use data in a productive way? Because I think at times we're all swimming a little bit in just the numbers and spreadsheets and all of that.
Without a doubt. I mean, I had plenty of experience in this particular thing with my job last year. Coming off the field, now being thrust into this position where, I only saw the end product when I was a player. I saw what basically we were talking about, how it was taken from this and kind of molded into this. And then now this is the part that I get as the player. So now my job last year was to take all of that information and basically not dummy it down, so to speak, but kind of dummy it down to where you have to know, excuse me, your individual that you're talking to, because that's a big part of it. Some guys are super into this, and some guys, I won't name any names, but there are guys on the Dodgers pitching staff that were, that are now potentially maybe on other pitching staffs that we're talking about here, who is one of the greatest human beings on planet Earth, by the way. But he's done things the way he's done them for 20 years, and he's really good at it. He knows what to do, and he just does it. He doesn't worry about the analytic side of it. And you know what? That's what makes our game so great, because there are still guys that can go out there and compete that way. But then there are tons of guys that go out there and they just yearn for this information. And whether that was, an organizational standpoint, how they were brought up from very, very early on, to, now most of these older guys have been kind of in this whole revolution for a little while, and they were still in the past revolution for a little while. So that's where, that those sticky points come up, and you have to kind of really understand who you're working with and kind of knowing when to press what and when not. And that's a lot of that is trial and error. Honestly, it's having those conversations with guys in the video room or in the dugout in between innings, and really not, honestly, I hate to use this word, but trying not to nerd out on them, because Mike and I talk about this a lot at our baseball facilities. We can nerd out with the best of them. It's just him and I talking like we're on the same wavelength. It just works like that. But not everybody is like that, and not everybody understands exactly the type of information that we have available to us. You have to find those ways. That's what makes a good coach, is somebody that can take something and basically not clone it. You know what I mean? You're individualizing it for whoever it is that you're working with, which is, it's not easy to do all the times.
Definitely. And Mike, you're obviously on the other side of the fence on the mound here. And it's like, okay, you could literally find anything imaginable for pitching data, I'm sure. And you've got the added bonus of it being a closed environment, so they can throw a pitch and then look over at a Rapsodo or whatever they want to almost every single pitch if they wanted to. So kind of, what can you add to that? Like what's your process in trying to decide what's important and what's not, and trying to just decipher information, trying to learn the learner and all of that different stuff just to deliver one or two messages, which is crazy to think about, but it's probably something you have to do every day.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and something that Chris and I have talked about. We could spend hours talking about this, write books for that would last hundreds of pages discussing how we get information to a player, because where it starts at is getting on their level. And we have to know where their level's at. So do they have a deep understanding of analytics? Do they have a mild understanding? Are they a player that maybe has a low education that is English is their second language? Do we have somebody that is, a guy from Harvard that studied biochemistry, like a Sean Poppin, or we have guys that are really bright and really understand data and have been well exposed to it. Some guys are like feel guys, and they've always thought about, hey, how does this feel? How do my hand feel? My fingers feel? My shoulder feel? It feels like this. It feels like that. And saying, how do I get on their level? How do I empathize with them? And I think the empathy starts with understanding their background. So we've had guys come to the organization, especially in AAA. We get a lot of guys that are in big league camp that come down. A lot of times they're free agent signs. So they've gotten to the big leagues before. They've gotten to a high level and had success this way. They're not 18 where we can really say, hey, we've got 3 or 4 years to develop this guy and get him ready. Instead, we're saying, hey, this guy's 30 years old. We're trying to help him create as much magic that's left in his tank and see how long he can play for. Can we help him get back to the major leagues, or can we help make him a contributor on our 40-man roster, whatever that dynamic might be? So I think when we look at it from that standpoint, we really try to say, what does this player know? What don't they know? What has their experience been? Because some of them have, analytics has been used against them. Hey, you suck because of X, Y, and Z. And whether that was said to them or that's what they heard is irrelevant. That's what their message was that they've received. And when we start from that position of seeking to understand and then helping rebuild some of that education process is huge. So one of the big things that we try to focus on is we make data normal, right? Similar to what Chris said, like we try to simplify it, small digestible pieces. We make data a part of the normal conversation, not by flooding people with 50 numbers every day, bogging them down with certain things, but we try to target what are the few things that are most relevant to this pitcher, and why do they matter? And when we find an opportunity, when they give us an opening, we try to make sure that we lean on the relationships we built with them and then put that into play. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of taking the Rapsodo and just putting it out there. And we might just leave it out there and not even use it, but it's sitting out there. The numbers are popping up. It's a recurring theme. And sometimes it might take a few bullpens for a guy might say, hey, can you walk me through all this? And I always encourage you guys to say, hey, like this might be overwhelming at first. I'm going to help you target 1 or 2 things of, hey, let's get your spin axis up on this pitch, or hey, we're really looking for this spin efficiency on your breaking ball to get above 75%, whatever that dynamic might be. And I think for a lot of the guys, when they see that it's not meant to be this, hey, you need to understand this massive spreadsheet of information, it really goes a long way. A quick story that I went to a player who, had spent a lot of time in AAA, had some success in the big leagues, but hadn't been too sticky up there yet. And I came to him with, I thought this is my first year coaching, 2018. And I thought, okay, here's my spreadsheet. Here's everything. I got my highlighter out. And I've got literally hundreds of numbers on these multiple pages. And it looks like we're going to run like a science experiment, right? We've got this deep algorithm. And it looks real fancy. I think I know I'm really on top of it. And I walk over and I'm like, hey, do you got a minute? I try to always be respectful of guys and which going to them versus saying, hey, when you're ready, come to me is a much better option. And something I wish I did sooner in my career. I try to never go to a guy and say, hey, I got something for you. And, and it's in my hand. Instead, I say, hey, when you have time, I've got some stuff for you. So that it's on their terms when they're ready and they're in their right mental, emotional state. So I go to them, walk over, I sit down, I start highlighting all these numbers. All right, this means this and that means that. And here's why this all matters. And he says, you could just see him like his eyes are about to explode. His brain is hurting. He's got a migraine and he's still got to play a game that night. He says, Mac, what do you want me to do? And I said, oh, I just want you to throw some more curveballs. And he said, that was it? And we had this moment, like this, almost this laugh. And it was like, yeah, your curveball is really good. I just want you to throw some more of them. And it was really just as simple as that. Even though I had all this stuff to back it up and really justify it. And he said, and I talked to him later and he said, look, I trust you, right? I've got faith in what you say. Like, I can tell that you're thorough in this. You wouldn't tell me something you still be wrong. Just tell me what you want me to do and I'll probably do it. And it really was this eye-opening experience. And that guy ended up in the big leagues last year. It was a really big time back end arm for us in the bullpen, and changed the trajectory of his career. So
I love that.
That's a big misconception, honestly.
That's great.
I think a lot of the times with the new data revolution that we're currently going through, I think as a player, sometimes they're very standoffish about it because they think that a lot of these front offices, they plug an algorithm in and what it spits out is what you do. And that potentially could be true for some organizations. I can't speak to all of them, but the ones that I have been in and the one that I'm currently in is one of at the forefront of the data revolution. That is absolutely not how it goes. Like, this is just another tool, just like, throwing a bullpen is a tool for a pitcher, to work on your craft, to hone in your craft. This is another tool. Yes, we have different ways of, computing this tool essentially, but all this information that we have is meant to help guys. And it's not force fed down anybody's throat. And that's something that I really appreciate because, I think they've realized quickly on that guys have a tendency to push back a ton when they're being forced to do something, but when it's their idea, how Mike kind of said that, I've got something for you whenever you have time, come and check this out. And whether it be as simple as like, hey man, we've realized that your curveball is really good. We want you to throw it more, like that's what the analytic part of this stuff is about. And I think sometimes it gets misconstrued with, the data and, we used to joke when I was in Tampa as a player that we had this thing called the matrix, and the matrix spit out the lineup. And, that wasn't necessarily true, now coming to look at it from the other side of the game, that's not really how it was. The matrix definitely may have helped be like, hey, this guy's matchup is really, really good. But, Evan Longoria is going to play against whoever it is, at that moment in time. It wasn't like, Longo's not doing too hot against, whoever, uh, pick your team in the AL East, that he's not going to play that day. Like, that's not how it works. So I just thought I'd throw that 2 cents in there.
That's really good.
Funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt, but it's funny you say that because sometimes I think the data has more confidence in the players than sometimes the coaches do, because it can't be emotionally biased, right? The data will say, no, this guy's like still a really good player, but he might have been 0 for his last 12. And we put too much stock into like the recency bias. Whereas the data is just going to say like, hey, this guy's still the best player you got. He's still the best matchup. It's just been, a run of bad luck. Or hey, a couple of tough at bats, but it has this deep confidence because of long term. We play 162 games, and so you see over the long trend. Whereas you might have like a football game where it's 16 games a year, and maybe there's a little more recency of what you got to do. But, I mean, the data backs the players most of the time, right? And it helps put them in the best position to succeed. And then you have the emotional side where you have coaches and people that are in the clubhouse that understand, that have that depth of knowledge with that person. That's really helpful.
No, I love that. And please keep playing off of each other. Cause again, I told you guys beforehand, I want you guys to go back and forth. So I apologize for interrupting, but Chris, I want to go back to you for just a second from something that Mike said. One, I think that making data normal, that's a slogan that needs to go on a t-shirt. I think that's really, really good. But also something that he said was, I'm going to be patient for you. And so whenever you look back at your playing career and now into your coaching career, Chris, is that something that you think that more coaches need to do? Like, I don't want you to speak for everybody, but I'm looking at me, and especially as myself as a younger coach, I was really eager to try and help someone, and usually I was doing it too soon, and when they weren't ready. But is that something that you have seen with players that you've worked with as well, and especially whenever you were a player yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, that was, I really do wish more coaches would take that sort of mindset into it, just because, I think nowadays, especially with the data being what the data is, it does such a wonderful job of honing in on something that we can specifically target, right? Like, whether it's, your spin efficiency coming off your changeup, or, the spin axis on your fastball or your two seamer, right? Like, we can hone in now, like, this is exactly what we know this is what the problem is. Like, now we can go about fixing it, right? Or fixing it this way. I think a lot of the times, with so much data being available and so much like minute, finite things that happen, guys try to put their stamps on guys super early on. And, a lot of the times, like you said, just guys they're either not ready, they're not mentally ready for that, they're not physically ready for that, or they're at a physical point in, time in that season where they're ready for something like that. to possibly take on an extra workload, whether it be batting practice or bullpen usage, or the amount of bullpens you're throwing. Like, guys just physically aren't capable of doing that at that point in time in the season. And I think just I've had tons of it happen to me, and the players are always your best coach as a player. You know yourself better than anybody else. And although you have to be very, very um, open with yourself and honest with yourself, because I think a lot of the times we see guys just get so stubborn that, they start to go backwards instead of forwards. But if you're open and honest with yourself, and, you can say things in a polite manner, be like, hey, man, I totally listened. I totally hear you what you're saying. Like, this is what's going through my head right now. And if let's maybe find a way that we can come together on this. It's a two-sided street. It's a two-way communication where, especially early on in my career when the data like this wasn't as much available, guys had a tendency to kind of, I know when I was drafted by the Indians, they couldn't say a word to us for the first month of the season, of our short season. And I don't think that necessarily happens as much anymore. It may still, but I've seen as soon as we get in, we got to get these guys in our program. We got to get them up to speed with what we're doing. And I do think there is a time and a place for that. But you also have to understand, as guys are getting, fresh kids coming in from either high school who've never been away from their mom and dad before and don't know how to do their own laundry, to where college guys are coming in just young and, full of enthusiasm and energy. And you get those guys and you meld them together. You need to give those guys a chance to gel and kind of feel themselves out a little bit. And then kind of start layering on, whatever types of things that you want them to do. But I do think that, really, really trying to give them the space that they need is going to be a huge, huge help for a lot of kids.
I'm a firm believer in success leaves clues, and I think that's been dropped so many times, and I love getting to hear you reinforce that. And Chris, I'm going to stay here with you because I don't know if our listeners know, but you actually made 11 career relief appearances, so maybe we should be talking to you about pitching. I don't
That's
know. I
why I
mean,
felt
have
like I
you
was
seen both
really
of them?
good for this podcast. Is I'm like, I definitely know exactly everything that you're talking about in regards to pitching. I may have dropped, I have more innings in the big leagues than you do on a
Do
couple of kids
that's for
last year
sure.
that were that were giving me some issues, but
That's funny. No, that's really, really good. As I was looking through your bio, I was like, that is something that I definitely need to make sure that people are aware of whenever we're talking about this stuff. But I do think that, even though that those were probably just fun games and you got to be able to do it, you did get to see a different side of it. And
yeah,
so has that helped you whenever you're working with both sides as the
no
game planning
doubt,
coach?
no doubt. That honestly was an incredible experience to draw back on, just because, granted, every game that I pitched in was a blowout. Whether it was, I don't think I ever pitched in a game when we were ahead. I think it was always when we were behind, and we were behind by a lot. But I've never felt so like in a small space as I did when I was on that mound. Like, yes, I looked at it from a completely different perspective, and my thought process when I was out there was, I am not a pitcher. I'm not trying to be a pitcher. I've seen it happen. I faced a guy and he blew out in Toronto when he was pitching to me in the 18th inning. And I was always told myself that I would never be that guy. I'm not going to go out there and pretend that I'm a pitcher. Number one, because I wanted to wipe my rear end for the next week straight, I didn't want to have Tommy John and shoulder surgery at the same exact time. I figured hopefully I could kind of stagger those at some point in my career. Um, but, but yes, having that where what everybody is looking at you on the mound. When you're behind the plate, you're covered, your face is covered, which is a good and a bad thing. But nobody can necessarily see the emotional side of things from behind the plate. Whereas when you're on the mound, everybody is looking at you, and all of the things that are going through your head, it's about executing a pitch or simplifying things, or, the billions and billions of things that can potentially go through somebody's head in a moment like that. Having that to draw back on and be like, bro, listen, dude, I get what you're saying. Now, granted, I've never pitched in the playoffs or anything like that, or tried to close out a game, but like, dude, I totally get where you're coming from. So like, I understand where you're at on that. So like, let's just start off on this level, and not that I'm above you or you're above me kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, having that level playing field to where, again, guards are let down at that point from, the player's standpoint. And then you can start to go to work.
No, I think that's awesome, and I think that's really cool. That obviously playing 10 years in the big leagues is a really cool thing, but getting to make 11 relief appearances is another really cool one. And Mike, I'm going to come to you with this one because I'm a huge proponent of trying to understand like an organization's culture, and I think that this is obviously the best way I can do it because we can't work for all 30 teams in the major leagues and all the way down. But what sets the Twins apart besides them basically hiring every great college coach in America and yourself? But what sets them apart as far as just the day to day, the stuff that we can't necessarily see? And again, this is kind of an open question because you haven't been part of a ton of different organizations like the 29 other ones, but you can kind of read the tea leaves on other organizations. You're like, hey, we probably do this a little bit better or this or that. But what really sets the day to day apart for you guys?
I think one of the, like you said, we bring in really bright minds, and we bring in people that are really diverse in their thought process. They come from outside the norm, and sometimes what happens is we spend too much time in our own bubble or our own, well, no pun intended with the bubble comment right now. Yeah, but it's one of those things where we spend so much time talking the same language that we only have a small bandwidth that we can pull from of resources. And so we go out and as the Twins in general and say, hey, there's something more extreme over here. There's something more extreme over there. Not because it's extreme, but because it's interesting. And let's take a look at it. Let's explore it. Let's talk about it. Let's interview it. Like, and those people that have different experiences and options to look at things from a wide plethora of knowledge, and those guys come in and they challenge the norm. They come in, they're kind of bold personalities, is say, hey, like, let's knock some stuff around and see what happens. And so there's a bit of a like ready, shoot, aim mentality, right? Like, we're not going to wait and work through it, because just like any good innovator or entrepreneur, they don't wait until they get to like, hey, we're perfectly lined up to make this happen. Like, I've got an idea, let's jump on it. Looks good, let's roll. And then we kind of figure it out from there and adjust on the fly. So there's a sense of urgency that is really unique, I think, within the organization compared to the organization I've been with or that I played for, and then also guys I've talked to. There's a bit of a like, hey, make sure you talk to your coordinator. Hey, did your coordinator? Okay, now ask the other coordinators. Did we check all the boxes all the way up? Versus saying like, look, we trust you, and kind of that Jocko theme, right? Decentralized command. We got to empower our employees to know what they're talking about. Empower your coaches to be smart, to make good decisions, and we'll learn from there. If we make mistakes, it happens, but we don't think that we need to fall in this like marching orders and work back and forth up and down the chain of command constantly, but instead say, hey, what was the thought process on decision making? And I mean, Jocko talks about this on a regular basis, not to say, I know he's getting his money's worth on the sponsorship, but it's, he discusses that idea of like, hey, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to go learn from them, right? Where we revert back to our training. What do we know? What are the things you trust yourself to make decisions on? And if you're unsure of your decision-making ability, ask for help. Pretty simple.
I really like that. And
You killed it on that.
Yeah, that was really, really good.
Seriously.
Chris,
I mean,
do you got?
I've been actually in both of your organizations. So, the cool thing is, I think another thing that made those two and my current one so special was the people too. Just having really, really good people that are all kind of pulling the same rope, so to speak, I think is, not nobody has their own agenda, because I've been in organizations where it's like that. And I don't think it's a reason, organizations don't do well because of stuff like that. Like, you have to have the right people in place from the bottom level all the way to the top. You know what I mean? That are in constant communication. Just like Mike said, the one thing that I thought like to a T, and I had, the leader of the Twins right now drafted me with the Cleveland Indians. So I know him very well, Derek Falvey. And he has been like that from day one that I've ever known him. And it's about empowering your people. It's about, it's about decentralized command. That's exactly what it's about. It's not about, oh, I can't do this, I have to call a coordinator to ask if I can do this with a kid. It's like, no, we trust exactly what you're going to do. Let's go out, let's put it into place. If we create a plan, let's communicate it. Let's continue to communicate it throughout the thing. We'll see how the progress goes. And then, if we need to make an adjustment or we need to bang it and go a different direction, then we go a different direction. It's not like nobody's looked down upon because, they decided to go out on a limb and try something, or, people feel they're, empowered to go out on a limb and try something crazy. That's the one thing that we do with the Dodgers is, we do a lot of unorthodox things, but it makes guys comfortable, and you get the best out of your players when they're comfortable in a comfortable environment.
It's funny you say that. I had a professor when I was doing my MBA program, and they said the second most expensive thing in business is to fire somebody, and the most expensive thing is to hire the wrong person.
Really?
And I feel like that really stuck with me, and it's so true with coaching, right? If you don't hire the right people, eventually you got to fire them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes double expensive. But if you hire the people the right way, the people you can trust, and then you train them well, not to solely subscribe to our ideas, but we have common principles and themes, but help them understand what we offer that we think is special, but also so what do you bring that's so special? And I think that's where, Chris offers like a really unique vantage point from his playing career, but there's a reason that you trick so many teams into keeping you around, right? Like, as you describe it, you do this phenomenal job of pulling people together and tapping people, creating trust, camaraderie, this deep connection that allows people to have success, not because they are always 100% right, but there's a level of forgiveness. Like, hey, I trust you. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be right every time, but it means you have my best intentions are, and we're going to go farther that way because we trust one another, versus this like, well, are you 100% sure? No, like, I trust you. And you invoke that in people. It's something that you bring out through your charisma. And you hear about it with the Twins, the major league staff and front office, when they talk about you, people, whether it's in Reno or anywhere else, anybody that's come across you in your career, you bring that really uniquely to a team. And I'm confident that's why you've lasted as long as you did. It's amazing.
It definitely wasn't because of my playing abilities. That's for sure. I thought it was my good looks, but we'll take that too.
Yeah.
That's good times. Good times. I could sit here with you guys all day and listen to you, just go back and forth, and so we're actually getting close to playing, and it's going to be an interesting season for all of us. And so, Mike, we'll stick with you. But what does the day to day look like? So let's say we're playing a 7:00 game, and let's just go from last year, because I have no idea what your days are going to, and you may not in the next couple of weeks, but let's rewind a year and say we play at 7:05. What time are you waking up? What does that day look like? And what all are you trying to fit into it?
Yeah. So, going back a year, I mean, it's crazy. It seems like it was so long ago. And yet, like, some of those days are so vivid in your mind. Most of the days kind of start, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, get up, get rolling, all that breakfast stuff, and get to the ballpark, usually get a workout in. Sometimes I'll go out trail running in the morning, really like getting in the mountains and being active, kind of get my mind right to spend a little of my intro. I think one of the most important things I do is I try to understand myself. And if I understand myself, then I have a baseline for what my bias is probably going to be. And I tend to be pretty introverted in that space. So I burn some of my introverted time through listening to podcasts or getting my trail running in. And then that way my social time, and I burn that social capital with with the players and the staff. So usually get there, kind of work out, 10 or 11 o'clock, kind of run through the initial feedback we're getting from the previous game, anything that I want to make sure I tackle for the day, get a little bit of a checklist going. Generally I'll, text a couple of players that maybe, hey, give me a heads up when you get to the ballpark, just got a few things for you, or, hey, just want to see if you want to throw your pen today or tomorrow, how you feeling? Just kind of give them a heads up so they know when they come to the ballpark, they've got their schedule versus springing anything on them. Most home games, BP, or we'll have catch play right around 2 o'clock, bullpens 2:15, 2:30. You get some BP going around 3 o'clock-ish, 4. Other teams BP, game prep during their BP, we eat some food, go through our advanced scouting report process, and then just a lot of small things in between leading up to that 7 o'clock game. Really try to get everything done by 6:30 so that when 6:30 hits, or 6:25, right in there, whenever that pitcher wants to go out, but give myself a time to say like, hey, we've taken care of the first half of the day, which is all of our development side, and now it's performance time. And to understand how our minds flip that switch isn't always binary, right? There's a little bit of a lag time in there that it takes. And so it's important for me to get in that right state of mind to switch over to game time. And that's where you let the players really perform, and think about how do I meet this player in that space? Because oftentimes during a game, there's really just, if you say anything, but there's only maybe one or two things you might say the entire game, to impact them. And one of the big things at the upper levels is not providing a helicopter mentality, but almost a removal, right? When that player needs you, they want to have the confidence in the relationship where they can come to you. And that's sometimes just walking by or having, a cup of water ready for them, or just give them a fist bump, whatever it is that happens. And then understand how to read your players throughout the game. There's moments where you see they're locked in, they're ready to go. Hey, they've processed it. You can see what they're expressing. Past experience, it's really important to build those relationships. What's going on throughout the game? Are we having maybe a scouting report challenge? Are we struggling with a relationship between pitcher catcher? Do we have some unfortunate, fielding stuff go on? Is the weather playing a factor? Like, what is going on throughout that game? We really try to just read, and that's when you're in, I think, the state of most of a servant mentality, right? Like, I'm here solely because to help the player at that moment, and that doesn't mean I have to do anything. Sometimes serving somebody means staying out of their way, right? Letting them roll, and sometimes that's like coming over and saying, "Hey, shit happens." And sometimes it's walking over and saying, hey, like, next three batters you got, remember, fastball's at the top half. Whatever those like little things are, but we try to really remove ourselves and let that player play the game, stay out of their way. Post game, pretty quick and easy, half hour or so post game, we're wrapping up any, odds and ends that come up, sort of quick planning for the next day. I usually try to get things tidied up if there's anything in the middle of, and then, then we roll.
I love that, and again, thank you for giving us a behind the scenes look. For game planning purposes, and since we're talking about that, and it's kind of the main theme of this show, do you meet with the catcher, the catching coach, and you guys just all kind of collaborate, or kind of how does that aspect look from just from a game planning point of view?
Chris will love this. I was actually the catching coach, as well as like assistant bullpen pitching coach.
Where do you think he learned all of his catching stuff from?
Well, I didn't move to Reno until this year, so from that standpoint, one of my big areas of strengths is the analytics side, and understanding scatter reports, understanding how it plays out in the game, and giving recommendations. And so with the game planning, it really comes down to, we try to give the catcher and the pitcher lineup reports ahead of time. We try to do pre-series meetings, but most importantly, it goes back to the very beginning of the season, and even before the season, where we do an education process on how our scouting reports work. The more information that player can take in on their own, the less that we have to do, which means that what we do is just small additions to fill in maybe some of the holes, or to make sure that we have good quality control. So we have, oftentimes what I'll try to do is encourage the other players to run the scouting reports with each other, right? If we get a new guy that comes up from AA, like, I try not to run it. I ask another player, one of our more experienced guys, like, hey, can you get them up to date on scouting reports and stuff? And they're great. They know it oftentimes, as well as I do, if not better, and especially because they see it in themselves. Now, what that allows them to do is, now the catcher comes in prepared. He's already got a deep level of knowledge of it. The pitcher comes in, and we're just providing a little bit of extra steering, right? If there's something that kind of gets tripped up, like, are we sure on this guy? Like, we might want to go slider over curveball with this guy. He really doesn't handle sliders as well as he does the curveball, or whatever that might be. It might be matching up with movement profiles, and how that pitcher's movement profile plays into what that hitter hits well. And then we really try to prioritize, like, where does this matter? Right? Where does my influence matter? Because if we've got a pitcher that dominates this type of hitter, this type of swing, we don't need to do anything. We just need to stay out of their way. Like, hey, stick to your strengths. That's probably the most common theme we say in advanced scouting report meetings: stick to your strengths. And as long as we've done the baseline knowledge to help that player know what his strengths are, we don't have to do anything else. But if we haven't done a good education process leading up to that, then what ends up happening is they don't know their strengths. So they might think like, oh, my changeup's my strength, when really that's his third pitch. And so he goes out, throws a changeup, gives up a ding dong, and we're over there going like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that, right? But that goes back 6 months or 4 months or 3 months. And so we really try to focus on that. And then the guys that maybe are more challenging at bats, where we say, hey, this guy's swing and what he hits well matches up, is a tough matchup for this pitcher. So we really do need to prioritize what pitch selection might look like, or location, sequencing, whether it's aggressiveness, whether it's hot zones, all those things. So.
Oh, that's great. So I'm going to flip it over to you, Chris. You've got a little different situation, which is interesting. So tell us a little bit about what your day would look like.
Yeah, I hope you guys are ready, because my day was a disaster. Usually I'm up by 8 o'clock in the morning. Like I said earlier, I have 3 young kids that were going to school. I would FaceTime for a half an hour before school and be at the ballpark in LA by 9 o'clock. 9 a.m. I was usually, if not literally the first one there. The door was locked half the time until about 9:10, but I would beat those guys to the club, all of our clubhouse staff to the clubhouse. And I would get to the clubhouse by 9 o'clock, 9:15, and get a quick workout in. That was kind of my time to, stress relief, just kind of blow it out, honestly, because, as we'll get into here, you'll see why I needed that time. But from 9:15, 9:30 to 10:30-ish was that workout time. And then basically from right around 10:30 to 12:30, 1 o'clock, to when players really started showing up into the clubhouse, I was constantly working on the series ahead, the next series we had. My job was specifically to figure out how all of our pitchers individually were going to get the opposing hitters out. So it was something that was cool, because it was something I did as a catcher almost my entire career anyway. And it was a very easy thing to, kind of just continue doing that while adding on some of the cool analytics stuff that we talked about, and some of the cooler information and stuff that I didn't have a chance to use as a player that now I do, on the coaching staff, which was pretty neat. But once the players started rolling around, guys would be rolling in and out of my office, wanting to see maybe an inning or a pitch on video. So, half the time I'm playing video tech for these guys and getting whatever it is that they wanted pulled up, or basically I was a therapist and had to, be that shoulder to lean on and cry on, and kind of, knowing when to get into somebody a little bit, and then when to kind of the guys you needed to coddle a little bit more through those times. But once basically the lineup for the opposing team came in that day, my day really started. I had to input all of our lineup into, we have a system that we use that basically we put the guys in lineup order every day. What that does now is, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog, he apparently wants some lunch or something, but between my daughter screaming downstairs and the dog like yelling at me, I apologize. But yeah, so basically inputting that lineup into our system, which now I can spit out all of our wristbands. We do the catcher's wristbands, which on our wristbands each individual one is for each pitcher that we have. And I'm in charge of getting everything dialed in, lined up. I'm writing on those wristbands little like quick hitter, little things for our catcher to remember, little, just easy, simple things, whether it be, it's like Mike said, slider over curveball, or up over down, in over out. He's obviously extremely aggressive. He's super passive, just little quick hit things like that go along with our wristbands. Once that got done, usually BP started. So I would go out, throw group 2 of BP almost every day, come back in for the last, half hour of BP, work on the next series ahead on trying to figure out how we're going to get these guys out, have a quick snack. 6 o'clock every day was our basically our manager, the bench coach, or the pitching coach, myself, and then whatever front office wanted to come in and kind of basically go over our bullpen, who's available for the day, what kind of runs do we like, If the starter can give us this inning, to the 5th inning, how do we kind of work backwards from there? We've got, Kenley Jansen in the 9th, if he's available. And then how do you go from there and basically fill in the gaps from there? This is who we like for this section of the lineup. Lefties come in and they're here, excuse me. And basically, trying to piece together that the best we possibly can. If we're up by 1 or 2, if we're down by 3, obviously that changes who's being utilized in the bullpen depending on, availability and stuff like that. By that time, by 6:45-ish, usually we're done with that meeting, depending on how long-winded some people can get in there arguing over who should be facing who. But it was also one of my favorite times of the day, just because you really got to dive into everything that I had put together to try to give Doc, our manager, the best possible, idea of who's the best matchup we have possible. So it was a lot of the stuff that I got to be a part of, which was kind of neat. Game time, 7:05. I was usually out there by then, but if not, right by the 2nd inning for sure. Still trying to just work on things for the next series, or, finish cutting out the cards for the wristbands, any little thing like that, or printing something out for one coach. I turned into being like the computer tech guy, which when I started this job, I basically knew how to turn a computer on, and that was about it. But I got very well versed in computer technology and printer technology really, really quick. So that was a lot of trial by error. But, my really only downtime during the day was pretty much when our pitcher was on the mound, the starting pitcher at least. If he gave us 6 innings, the only time I really was on was anytime our guys come into the dugout. I'm constantly sitting down with our catcher and the pitcher that inning, going through, hey, here's who we have coming up. This is just a quick reminder. I would have my more detailed scouting report with me, as he would have it as well, in his little binder that I carried out there for him. But we would kind of go over it real quick. Just remember, hey, if this guy gets on base, he's a runner. This guy's a bunter, whatever. Remember, his curveball plays really well over, his changeup, say, if it's Clayton Kershaw or something like that, right? So once the starter was out of the game, it was go time, because a lot of what I did was with the bullpen and matching up these guys. So I'm constantly working our catcher through, hey, you are going to have Joe Kelly up until this person. Then it's going to be Adam Kolarek for lefty. Now it's going to be different because they have to have 3, they have to have a 3-run or 3-batter run. But back in the good old days, when we didn't have that stuff, you're constantly running guys through, hey, we're going to have this pitcher coming in. So also try to remember, hey, this is the matchup we really, really want. If we have to pitch around a guy, and basically know who you have warming up in the bullpen, because if we want that matchup more than we want the matchup with the current pitcher, it's just not a time to bring the pitcher for the bullpen in yet. Let's be smart about that. And just having those little types of communications in game is what really, really counts and what really helped us out. Once the game ended, I would go back into the weight room and usually cardio for 45 minutes, have a quick dinner, get back to the hotel by 11:30, and work until 5 in the morning on these series ahead. And that was 7 days a week for 240 days of the year. But I loved every second of it, and I drank insane amounts of coffee to stay awake. So
You'd have to. And so it's going to look a little bit different this year. And so let's talk a little bit about what the game, like what you're paying attention to in the game. And you hit on that a little bit, but like we all get caught up in paying attention to the parts that we're most familiar with, I think, or just things that we feel like we're good at noticing. Is there anything that comes to mind as far as like, what are you paying attention to? Where did you feel like you were most helpful? And you talked about like planning out the innings and who was available for the best matchups. And I think that's fantastic. But was there anything else?
yeah, believe it or not, I actually paid a ton of attention to if our pitchers were tipping. I didn't necessarily, I was watching the game when, we were at bat. But most of the time that was in that dugout time where it's crucial to dial in, the catcher and the pitcher for the next inning coming up, and having those conversations with those guys. But I was constantly looking for if our pitcher was tipping. Just trying to be aware of sometimes guys as a catcher, you've got so much going through your head at any moment in time, keeping an idea of like, hey, do you see a guy making an adjustment in the box, whether you do or you don't, or a way a guy, just sometimes the way a guy takes a pitch, as a pitcher and a catcher, sometimes you get a feeling, that it's just that internal gut feeling that you get at, if a guy spit on a pitch you had no business doing, you've seen it on video, all of their data tells you that, he should be swinging at this pitch. What is the reason for that? Was it him making an adjustment? Was it, is our pitcher giving something away that he shouldn't be, kind of thing? And I think, obviously with everything that's been going on, non-coronavirus related in baseball world, as regards to stealing signs and all that stuff, we try to just be extra, I guess, or try to step our game up on that, because we were the unfortunate recipients of losing a World Series in 2017 to the Houston Astros when, this whole scandal was going on. So, obviously, rightfully so, that's a really big thing in our clubhouse and our organization. So that was something that I looked for when I was a player anyway. So it was kind of a natural transition, I guess you can say. But, most of the time it was just communicating with Doc, letting him know like, hey, this is what his pitch count is. Hey, we really like this matchup. Just to give you a reminder, if you're thinking about making a move, let's get somebody going. Do we want to have somebody up for the lefty? Being in the National League, the pitcher's hitting. There's a lot of gamesmanship going on getting somebody up, not getting somebody up. So just, those little reminders for Doc when he's got obviously a ton of stuff going through his head as well. Having those little things that, hey, do you want to have somebody warming up? Pitcher spot's coming up. If we need to pinch hit, do we need somebody going? Little things like that the bench coach would do, I would do, and just, communicating, just having fun talking baseball.
So just for Mike's sake here, what are some tips whenever you see pitchers tipping pitches? What are some different ones that Mike can look for whenever he's making sure that his pitchers aren't tipping?
Yeah, fingers are definitely one of the biggest ones. Whether it be sticking out straight or really squeezing in, any sort of wrist differential, whether a guy comes set and he's like this on his fastball, or a guy comes set and he's like this on his curveball because he's spiking it in his glove, or, a certain pitcher we had an issue with being outside of his glove and being inside of his glove on a certain pitch. You'd be surprised, you guys, and this is nothing against pitchers because I love you guys, but how many guys, when they are in the stretch, they have the ball behind their hand, behind their body, they're wiggling it, they will either stop on the exact pitch they're throwing, or they will wiggle, and they'll lift their glove up first, and then they will have the pitch they're throwing in their hand, and it's just things that they don't think they're doing, or, it can be as simple as you're breathing, like when you come set and go, it could be like a go, as where if we have a base stealing threat on base, that's something we got to be aware of. You know what I mean? Like we can't be giving away free bases like that just because, the data shows, the numbers show, if you get a runner from first to second base, the average runs per scored inning goes up like 0.64 or something. I don't know if that's the exact thing, but it's a pretty significant advance in runs per inning that go up just by a runner moving up 90 feet. So those are little things that may not be noticed by anybody else, but are constantly going on. And, from a position player standpoint, guys are always looking for any sort of tip they can get. It's not cheating by any means, because if the pitcher's telling you what they're doing in game, it's one thing if you're cheating on a video to see, what signs I'm putting down, that is completely different. But, if a pitcher comes set a certain way on one pitch and comes set on a certain way on another pitch, like he's giving you the information, you're not being smart enough to either utilize it and take it, or, put it into play, essentially, is how kind of we think about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Like how much is
Jocko,
that's right. With tipping pitches is fascinating, and we don't just tip pitches in the form of like, I mean, you think about Dempster,
Correct.
obviously the most extreme, right? He had his pitches get tipped. He said, this is never going to happen again. So got extreme with it and talking with him, he said it was as simple as that. It wasn't like Nomar Garcia Parra, like, this is my prep work, this gets me mentally focused. He's like, no, I just don't want to pick it. And he just kept it. That's what he did. So, but we do this in counts, right? Like, how many times do you look at a count-based trend and you're like, this guy throws 92% fastballs in 2-0 counts. Like, you want to talk about tipping pitches, like, don't worry about this. Like, look at the counts.
Right.
And this guy is tipping almost every time. And so we've had the lowest hanging fruit is sometimes not even looking at this, right? Because you could spend an entire game trying to figure out till the 5th inning, like, oh, I get it now. I know what he's doing, right? He double taps on fastball, he taps once on changeup, or it's like a weaker tap on changeup. Or if we can get that tip ahead of time, either one through video, like Chris was talking about the physical side, but even if you had like a count based or a pitch type, those sort of things are huge. I mean, any little advantage, it's hard enough to hit, right? And now we've got things like Rapsodo and TrackMan and these Edgertronic cameras where we can understand exactly what the guy's doing, and we create these really unique movement profiles. And so any advantage you can take, you're going to capture that right away. But it also works on the other side. Can we make a pitcher that maybe is underperforming or a fringy guy in terms of stuff, but we give him the greatest advantage possible in count-based trends, right? Where you say, hey, 2-0, he's still a coin flip guy. We don't know what's coming. Because the hardest pitch to hit in baseball is the pitch you don't know is coming.
Well, that's great advice. And so let me turn the question around for you as well here. What's something that you pay attention to during the game? It may be something like that, but just what are some things that you try and notice as the game's going along?
I think it depends upon the side of the game that you're focused on. In the minor leagues, we have fewer coaches. And so, I cover advanced scouting report. I do catching. I did outfield. I do infield positioning. I help with advanced scouting on the hitting side. I mean, you have these really deep dynamics where it's kind of like being a small business owner, right? You gotta be the janitor and the CEO. And in the minor leagues, you have to work through a lot of those things. So, we try to do as much ahead of time as possible. But one of the things I encourage I try to focus on is not getting too deep involved in the game in the minor leagues, because I want the player to have to do it themselves. They learn best when they are out there having a battle. And if they ask a question, that's different. But like letting them sort things out themselves and figure things out, because we aren't in the space of having to win games. Like Chris is in a space of like, we need to win and we need to win now, right? We need to win every inning going forward, and we've got to make sure we do that. For us, we're still in a lot of ways development, right? We're still helping this guy because this guy is not in the major leagues for a reason. So what do we do to help him get there? We give him the tools. We help him in certain spaces. I try to empower the people around us to say, hey, what are you noticing? So like the guys that work in the video room that are keeping an eye on the TrackMan, they might see that a guy's spin axis is kicked down and we're losing some carry on his fastball. And so when he throws that fastball that normally plays above average, even though he's got average velocity, it might play into average, and we might be able to give him a heads up. It may be something we've been working on in our prep work. As he starts to fatigue, we might see that spin axis come down. Guys get late, arm becomes late, a little more forearm fly out, runs into trouble there. We might look at like count-based trends. We try to keep relatively detailed notes of just looking at what's going on throughout the game. Are we falling into patterns? Are we tipping something? Is the other team watching what our catcher's doing in terms of the way that he's setting up? Does he set up on breaking balls with one knee down and he doesn't on fastball, or he sets it with the other knee down? What are the things that are going on with that dynamic? Similar things like Chris was describing, we might look at base runners, we might look at who's going, who's not, when are they looking to go, are there counts when this guy decides to go? Because we, in a lot of ways, are working also as advanced scouts for the major league team. And so the information that we can start to document and put together in preparation, both so that our major league team knows what our players are doing and what they're doing well, but also looking ahead, hey, this guy we're playing could easily end up in the big leagues and playing our major league team. And so we work on both sides of that as well. So, there's nothing I would say that I really hone in on. I try to stay observant of the game and stay diversified. But I think that's, part of coaching in the minor leagues.
Sure. No. And let me be the first to say that I really appreciate the depth of answers that you guys are giving, because it's like, man, I'm going to need to go listen to this 2 or 3 times just to make sure that I'm fully understanding like the depth that you guys are dropping. So I appreciate that.
Come hang out in Reno, dude. You'll never get out of there.
I'm gonna have
Chris and
to.
I will.
Like seriously, I will for sure.
We got
And
whiteboards and
Yeah,
oh,
we've
I can
taken full
imagine.
advantage of the whiteboard. We're really good doodlers, Well, him, so not so much me, but yeah.
That's good.
oh,
That's
there's
good.
lines, vertical approach angle. Like,
Yeah.
what does it all mean? It's great.
No, I love that. That's great.
Uh,
But I told you guys a little over an hour, and so we are approaching the lightning section. So this is just a little bit of get to know you, get to know how you learn, how you think, and just some different things that you guys are really enjoying, especially in the time that we're at now with so many coaches that are not able to get out on a field, and I know it's driving us all crazy. But Chris, let's go back to you. What is something that you've learned lately that's gotten you really excited? And I know that we've gotten the opportunity to spend a couple of months really digging deep into some different stuff. And so, besides Jocko, being the host of our show apparently today, what are some different things that you're really excited about lately?
Yeah, so our internal website, internal system has gotten like a complete makeover from what it was last year. We've created our own internal scouting site that I've had a chance to really kind of dive into. Whereas during the season, it would have been a little bit more difficult just because you have so many other things going on to really kind of take a dive and just understand, the ins and outs of the system. Something that I think is really cool that I actually had a part in creating was, we all know about True Media and that being a scouting platform that we all use for video, and stuff like that. And we've created our own called Blue Media. We call it Blue Media, kind of playing off the name there, but on both sides. But it's something that is not. I guess it's not copying, but it's it has certain aspects that we all liked from Bats, which were not very many for me personally, because I felt like Bats was created. And for those of us that don't know Bats is also another scouting platform that we use, a video platform that all 30 major league teams use. True Media is the newest one of those platforms, which is great for me in my case. Basically, it gives me so many more options to look at as opposed to Bats. I kind of refer to Bats as like when the cavemen took the square stone and chiseled it around and made it round, like that's when Bats was also created, the same time frame. So True Media is light years above that, but we
Still running on DOS.
Yeah, exactly, and like dial up, So it sucks because you can't use it away from the ballpark. You have to have it on, like Bats is on an internal system, like a store memory unit, and to travel with it, it's great for in-game stuff. Don't get me wrong, that's why I love it, because that stuff, to be able to have your video like that and have the clip cut and put in there so a player can go from the field to the video room downstairs in the dugout, or in the clubhouse or wherever it may be, and see his at bat or see those pitches like in real time. That's what Bats is awesome for. But basically that's the only thing. So in my opinion, personal opinion, but I've really had a chance to kind of dive into our own internal site and just see the inner workings of it and see how cool and how user friendly and useful it really is, which has been pretty cool.
Mike, coming at you, what's something lately that you've learned that's gotten you excited?
I think that the two big things: continuing to grow my Spanish, right, and understand how to communicate with our Spanish-speaking players. And that doesn't mean that I have to be fluent in it, right? Although I'm working toward that, right? But it's again, we keep coming back to that word empathy, but it's showing that you're trying, right? It's creating deeper connections. And what I found is the more that I try to use it, I'm better at it than I thought I was. The players are more understanding and wanting to help you than you might think. And it creates this deeper human element that exists between us. And so getting the opportunity to utilize that Spanish and start to create communication and dialogue with our Spanish-speaking coaches or Spanish-speaking players, and then even the Spanish-speaking between English-speaking coaches, right, as their primary language, because now we're seeing where our holes are at, and we create this connection of, hey, we're all growing together. And it takes a ton of humility. And then I think growing the emotional intelligence that I approach players with is, I think it's a lifelong thing that we need to work on. I think we should be doing our whole lives, not just in baseball, but in the world around us. But when I look at the connections I've been able to make with the players over this time, right, we're all in this together. We're facing this common enemy, this common challenge, and we're able to bring these bonds together that create a level of desire to understand. Like, hey, how you doing? Like, what's going on with your family? Like, no, I don't care about your throwing program yet. Like, what's going on with you? Like, where are you at as a person? Like, and then finding out they're asking me questions like, Mac, how you been? Like, how are things going? Instead of this being like this coach player, like, how's your throwing program? Are you weightlifting? Are you getting your running in? Like, it's like, no, we are in this like peer-to-peer relationship that is truly authentic and empowers them to be in control of their career and their life. Not just on the field, but like, hey, how are your kids doing? Right? I mean, one of the first things I got was a player had his baby, and within 12 hours, he's calling me. He's like, dude, oh my gosh, right? This is amazing. And he's excited about it. And this guy's not, he's only like 2 or 3 years younger than I am, right? It's an amazing blessing. So above all else, the relationships that we build and the way that we build those, it goes far beyond anything that we can learn on a data standpoint, anything we can pick up from video. This requires the human spirit, the human element. It's really enjoyable. So.
I really like that. What are you using for Spanish?
So we have a teacher that is employed by the Twins. And so he does that. And then things like Pimsleur and SoundCloud, different podcasts that add on top of it, and then different books. And then just frankly, a lot of Google Translate. And I should say, most importantly, the Spanish speaking coaches and players, like they are your best resource, because how we say it on Google Translate is not how they're going to say it. I still remember I was trying to teach English to one of our Spanish speaking players when I was still playing. And he was actually from Haiti, like the Haitian side of the island of Hispaniola, but which is looked down upon. And I bought a book, and I'm like going through it. It's got 10 sentences, 10 words in the word bank. And I asked him, I said, hey, let's go through these. And as we're going through, it's like pescado, and he started getting mad. He said, no, and he started yelling. I said, what in the heck? It's just 10 words and 10 sentences. Like, it's not that hard. But he didn't know half the words that were in that word bank, even though they were already in Spanish, because they don't use them. And so, different dialects, different places that you're from. And so the Spanish the coaches and the players are your best resource by a long shot.
That's fantastic. I love that. And something I've been digging into lately, Pimsleur has been really good. I've actually really liked that quite a bit. So the next question, Mike, I'm going to stay with you. The best coaches that you've been around, what set them apart?
Yeah, my college coach in State Bakersfield, Bill Kernan, and he was a guy that pulled the best out of you, right? He challenged you, he pushed you, and he understood that stress is where things, stress is where things grow, right? Our muscles grow, our bones grow, right? Like, you need that heat. The strongest and most beautiful things in this world are created under extreme heat, right? And extreme pressure. And he was somebody that did that. He challenged us to be our very best. He never allowed us to settle, and he was willing to ruin a relationship with you if it meant he was going to take a chance on making you better, right? As a person, not just a player. And so he wasn't in it because he wanted to be a kind person. He wanted to be a good person. And I've really carried that with me my entire career, that I'm going to go to bat for the right thing. I'm going to do that, pick and choose my battles, but I want to make sure I go to bat for what's right. I'm not going to be there to always be kind to the guy or to the person throughout my life. I want to do the right thing. And Bill definitely brought that out in us.
Love that. Chris, what do you got?
I mean, honestly, I could probably name like 50. One that really comes to mind, who I really connected with, and I always very much just appreciated his like articulate thought process and pushing me to kind of get out of my comfort zone, was James Rowson. Former big league hitting coach with the Twins, is now the offensive coordinator with the Miami Marlins. And it's funny because we had these conversations in 2017. I look at 2017, which was my first year with the Twins, as one of the greatest years of my career. Now, I came off the year in 16. I was in the World Series with the Cleveland Indians. And obviously that is a very, very high pinnacle of things to beat in terms of teams and seasons and all that stuff. But, you know, J-Ro did such a, like, just an incredible job of getting buy-in from literally every player on the team. You know, we all, you know, it wasn't any one person, but we all as a group, as a staff, and as a, you know, players, we took the first 100 loss team ever in the history of baseball and made it to the playoffs the next year. So no team ever in baseball history has ever lost 100 games and then went to the playoffs the next year, except for the 2017 Minnesota Twins. And I think, you know, J-Ro was a really, really, like, extremely integral part of that. I mean, as were all of the other coaches on that staff. But, you know, he is one who, you know, Mike talked about constantly getting the best out of you. He had a way of communicating that he dumbing things down, and he was not afraid to try new things, but to have you understand trying new things all the time is something that's really difficult to get across as a coach, but even to understand as a player, you know. And he just had that ability about him to be able to connect with guys and to somehow get the best out of them. And, you know, one of the other ones, you know, that definitely comes to mind is Terry Francona. I mean, I just think that, you know, there's not a coincidence that he's one of the better managers in our game as we speak. You know, he's done what he's done, kind of transcending the game the last few years, and how he has the open door policy. You know, that's something that I've seen a lot more. Dave Roberts does a lot of that, which is outstanding. But, you know, Tito would legitimately get pissed off at you if you walked by his door and didn't either poke your head in to talk crap to him or, you know, play cribbage with him, but just to say hello. Like, he would chew your ass out and be very sincere about it. But you knew he had your back. I mean, it's just, he's one of those guys, he's a player's manager. And, you know, we've heard that a ton in the past, but he really, really genuinely cares about his guys. And he's so smart. And it just seems like he's always one step ahead of the game, you know, in regards to the chess game that we play on a daily basis. But those two, I think, are, you know, some of the two that at least come to my mind right away. Like I said, I could name, you know, Paul Molitor. I respect an absolute ton just because he got me as a player, which is really crazy coming from a Hall of Famer and, you know, a slapdick backup catcher. But you know, you wouldn't think that those two, you know, would get each other. But, you know, Molly, I think, really appreciated what I brought to the table. And, you know, I always really much respected him for that. And I respected his, you know, his knowledge for the game. He saw things that nobody sees, you know, and those are the things that I geek out on. Like, guys that, like, see things before they happen, or, like, he'll say, like, hey, watch this is going to happen right now. And then it does. And you're like, what? Like, how did you know that was going to happen? You know? But a lot of guys like that, just, they have that innate ability to kind of, you know, to feel the heartbeat of the game before it really happens.
Oh, that's great. So my next question is something that we can steal from you and we can add next week if we had practice. So let's say that you're in charge of running tomorrow's practice or training session, and you know that you've got this thing right here that's going to be a hit. Like, you know that the players are going to love it. They've either told you that. What would that be?
Pitchers BP. For all my American League teams, man.
That's awesome. I love that. Mike, what do you got?
I love it.
You can't say pitchers VP. We've already done it.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying. Yeah,
that's why I did it first.
I think one of the big things is competition, right? Like, once you guys compete, have fun. And it doesn't have to, you know, like, whether it's dress-up days or it's, you know, wear what you want. I mean, obviously Dodgers are big on this. We're big on this. Like, we're not here to regulate. We're not here to, like, tell you whether you got enough black on your cleats, like, are your pants high enough, and there's, you know, did you shave properly? Like, most importantly, like, hey, who can have the most fun today? And I think things like that, where we have those dress-up moments where we say, like, hey, who's got the craziest stuff that we're going to throw out there? That's what I would focus on, is bring those guys together through laughter and joy.
I love it.
Or pitchers BP, you know.
Yeah.
Or pitchers BP.
That is laughter and joy. Trust me.
Or maybe showing up the hitters. No,
it could be. There are plenty of those guys that do.
Shoot.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Mike, we're sticking with you. Favorite books and resources that you want to share with our coaching community?
Oh gosh. Where do we start? I mean, the baseball side of this is crucial, right? And we want to learn those things. So books like Smart Baseball, MVP, or MVP Machine, excuse me. I think those are wonderful. But most importantly, I try to enrich my mind through people that think outside of baseball and outside of sports. And so when you look at somebody like Admiral McRaven, and Make Your Bed, See Stories, like the books that he's written are absolutely phenomenal. These guys, Jocko, as we've talked about far too much on the podcast, probably, there's elements of this that they could run deeper into the human spirit, right? And they run in the infrastructure of who you are, and they're very visceral. XISO and miss rates and vertical approach angles, like those aren't visceral, right? But if we can tap into the person, if we can tap into who they are in their heart and their mind and their gut, we really can capture something unique. And so I just encourage people to really dive into that space of how do I enrich myself as a diverse being that creates greater perspective, empathy in the world, and understanding. And then I think, volunteerism and service to others, right? Like I help run nonprofit Baseball Miracles. And I think with groups like that, like going out and serving your community, go out and serve together, go out and go to a soup kitchen together, a food bank, go pick up trash together, like find things that draw you deeper. And, the Twins over the years have done a lot of stuff in the Dominican and Puerto Rico. Go do something that is so far outside your normal perspective and bandwidth that it shocks your system a little bit, and you're forced to have that little bit of survival. And I think, I really like Dan Crenshaw's book, Fortitude, that I was reading about, or I've been reading, and his talk about what he did in the Navy SEALs and how important it is to suck. Like, go suck and get your butt kicked and struggle through it, labor through it, and then you'll come out the other end much better. So,
Chris, coming at you.
Yeah, I mean, you crushed it again on that. Like, from the the servitude standpoint to the wanting to better yourself. I've been going through a little thing with my oldest son, who's 8 years old, about being accountable. That's something that I take is something that's kind of interwoven in the fabric of me, that my father kind of instilled in me, is having those values and using those on a daily basis. And whether it's doing the right thing, not doing the right thing because that's what you think somebody else wants to see, but doing the right thing because that's what you know in your heart. And I've tried to live every day of my life by that. And it's fun now getting to try to instill those things in my two sons, because I had to tell my son yesterday, we were in the backyard sweeping, and he just goes through it real quick. He's like, "Okay, Dad, what's next?" And I looked at it, and like, I never intended this for my dad to come out in me in this particular situation, but I look at it, and it's a disaster, right? Like, he just did it literally as fast as he could and was like, "All right, dude, let's go play something now." And I said, "All right, do it again." And he's like, "Why?" And I kind of explained to him, like, "You didn't do a very good job." Okay. So he goes and does it again. And again, it was just not a very good job. He got a little bit more, but he didn't take his time. And I said, "Listen, bud, this is one thing that Grandpa told me a lot when I was a kid, that if you take pride in what you do, and you do it right the first time, you won't have to do it again. And if you would have done this right the first time, we could have been playing baseball already, or jumping on the trampoline, or whatever it was that he wanted to do." But just trying to constantly instill those values in myself and in my sons, and my daughter when she gets of age too. But really trying to I try to serve them in that way, and I try to just be who I am. Who I am is what I am, and I try very hard not to change who I am because of who I'm around. I think sometimes you may have a tendency to do it unknowingly, but I think the more we can kind of stay in our own space and just really understand who we are, like, through and through, the better off we're going to be outwardly as a person and a human being in the community, but to your family as well.
I love that. And guys, I'm just going to open up the mic for you. Number one, let me just say thank you so much for joining us today. I had a blast. And again, I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to all of this because my brain is fried at the moment just from all the knowledge bombs that you were dropping. Seriously, this was super good. But Chris, we'll stick with you. Open mic, and I'm going to mute myself. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners or just talk to them about before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all ready for baseball to start first and foremost, coaches included. This is something that I know for myself personally has been extremely difficult from the fact that not only do I not have the one thing that I've had since I was a little kid to do, and then I truly am like extremely passionate about, but just having to learn how to kind of be half retired and really be like a dad. I was kind of fun dad for a lot of the years because I was home for 3 months. We always had fun. Nobody ever got in trouble. Occasionally they did, but like stuff like that. But I would encourage, you know, everybody to not only enjoy baseball coming back, but to really for the next, not too far away distance, just in the very near future, to try to dive into your family. I think that's one thing that's really come to the forefront throughout all of this stuff that we're going through right now. And a lot of this family time my wife and I have been talking about are, memories are being made here today and this past 3 months that my kids will remember for the rest of their lives. And it's funny to think about that. And you kind of start thinking back, like, wow, man, I can remember sitting at the table with my family having dinner with the radio playing, or, my dad playing catch with me and stuff like that. And just getting to do things with my kids, take them to the lake, something I've never been home for 4th of July or like since high school. So, it's been over 20 years since I've had the chance to experience this, but really, trying to soak this time up with my family and, hopefully it's not like this next year. Let's all really hope that, because if it is, I think we're all in a really bad spot. But trying to take advantage of this, not free year off, but kind of a year off from the madness that has controlled our lives, and take that step into my family's life a little bit more, and just kind of never know what will happen from it.
I love it. Mike, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, Chris knocked out of the park as usual. The vantage point of family and the opportunity to take a look at the world around us and truly seek to understand, but also to create those deeper ties, those deep-rooted relationships that are what make life so special, right? That's what makes it so special for us. Baseball is just a medium that we build those relationships, that we grow in the richness of our life and the way that we enrich others' lives, right? It's not just always about like how our lives are filled, but like our lives are oftentimes filled by the way that we serve others. And I think during this time, like, and going forward, I hope that, just to pass along that the greatest thing that you can do for the world around you is to leave it better than you found it. Right. And that should be our ultimate goal. Like, how do we leave it better than we found it? Whether that's on a baseball field, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's on a virtual classroom, whether it's your podcast, whatever it is, like, leave the world better than you found it. And it's something that I've taken with me my entire life. And I try to make sure that each person I come across ends up in that space. So go serve, love the world around you, and continue to leave it better than you found it. And I got a question for you, actually. Turning the tables on.
Oh gosh, here we go.
Jonathan,
what do you got?
I know you didn't know this was coming, did you?
No, I know.
What is the biggest takeaway that you've seen, or common theme you've seen from the people that you've interviewed over the years, and how has it enriched your life?
Common theme? I think, that's obviously a tough question to answer. And there's so many differences that I think that's interesting, but I think the best ones have no ego. Like, they've got no ego and they're player driven. You've used the word serve a ton, and I love that, but it just seems like they're good dudes at heart, and they have their players' interest at the forefront. They're not trying to gain an advantage to further their career, at least the ones that I've been around. I know there are some out there that have that, but I think the best ones have no ego, because number one, then you're putting your players first, then you're understanding that you don't know all the answers. and those things just go hand in hand with each other of what makes the best coaches that I've gotten the chance to be around as well. So and the ones that you mentioned have those as well, it seems like. So but yeah, I would say that's the biggest theme that I've seen, even though everybody goes about it a different way.
Love that. I appreciate you entertaining my question too.
Of course, anytime. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on. I know that I had a blast. I know that I learned a ton, and I will link your contact in the show notes, and we'll roll from there. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
You're awesome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Yeah.